folks. I'm Jerry Royals, and I'm sitting here in the study of Clem Leone, who is part of the greatest generation, having been involved in World War II and then having finished out his career in the military. And we're in Clem's, as you can see, eventually a study here that he has put together a great deal of memorabilia, and we'll be discussing it today and talking with Clem about some of his recollections of his service career and things that stood out as significant to him throughout his life, actually. Clem, how about starting off and just saying kind of where you grew up and how you happened to get up into the U.S. Army and then the Army Air Corps?
Well, I was born in Baltimore, Maryland, and I was a senior when Pearl Harbor was attacked, and like all the other guys in the class, anxious to get into the service, but Mom had other ideas, so she wouldn't let me join, and she did promise that if they ever started drafting 18-year-olds, that then she'd let me go. So as soon as they said they were going to draft 18-year-olds, I was right back to Mom, and she said, all right, if that's what you want to do, do it.
She signed your papers, huh?
Right. So I enlisted in the Army Air Corps, and at that time, well, I wasn't very large. I was 5.5 feet. I think I weighed every bit of about 124 pounds. And everybody was kidding me, asked me what was I want to be, a tail gunner, you know, and that gave me ideas because I did want to fly.
Yeah.
And Mom said she let me enlist with the promise that I wouldn't fly.
Oh, would not fly?
Would not fly. And I told her that that was good unless they made me. And so that was agreeable. And well, as we go on, I'll show you why I started to fly.
When you first got enlisted, when did you actually enter the service, and where did you enter? Right in Baltimore?
I entered the service in Baltimore in November of '42.
Okay.
And
what did they do to you then?
Well, they sent me to Camp Pickett, Virginia.
Okay.
At that time, it was not a fort; it was still Camp Pickett. And from there, they sent me to Miami Beach, Florida.
How tough was that?
Oh, it was really rough. I'd never been to Florida in my life, and couldn't believe this was right around Christmas time, and to be in khaki uniform and short sleeve shirt at Christmas, it just was unbelievable.
It wasn't like Baltimore, was
No,
it?
not at all. So there we took a battery of tests, and I was there for basic training.
Was it Army basic training, or
Army,
was it Army Air Corps?
Well, Army Air Corps, of course, was part of the Army Signal Corps, so it was just Army, period. And the only difference was that we wore an Air Corps patch instead of some other kind of patch. And our barracks was a hotel room. We had 2 people to a hotel room.
That was tough, I'm sure.
Right, and our orderly room was the lobby, and we ate in one of the local cafeterias. And it was really a tough time.
Chow too, I bet.
And then he told me that they were going to have basic, so took us out on the beach and in the sand, and we were taught how to open and close ranks. And but at that time it was lunchtime. We come back to the barracks or to the orderly room, and there's my name posted, restricted to room to ship out. And that was the only basic I got in my whole career in the Army.
Yeah, I was going to say, what was your thought when they said you're going to ship out?
Well, I had no idea, you know. I mean, it's all new to me.
Right?
So then from there they shipped me up to Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
Oh,
the radio school.
Change your climate in December or January,
right.
Huh?
And then turned in all my uniforms, which I'd had altered to fit, and to get rid of all that summer stuff and get the winter uniforms. And then get those altered to fit. That was a 13-week course on the radio operator and mechanics.
And was it an air base or was it a
No, it was just
no,
it wasn't even nothing to do with the airfield. It was just a school.
Just a school.
Just a school
there, huh?
at Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Yes, and so from there, when we graduated, well, to begin with, once I was assigned to the school, I was promoted to a PFC.
Another $3?
5.
5.
Went from 50 to $55 a month. And
a lot of places to spend it in Sioux Falls?
Not really, not really. When I graduated from the radio course, that automatically gave me a promotion to corporal. Now I forget how much more that was.
Probably about $7.
But that meant, again, having stripes cut off
Yep.
and new stripes put on,
Mm-hmm.
which was fine. But they said that anyone that could pass the physical would have to go to aerial gunnery school because they were in need of radio operators. And so next thing you know, I'm heading for Harlingen, Texas. So here went all my winter uniforms again and back to the summer uniforms again. And so we had I think it was a 6-week gunnery course in Harlingen, both air-to-air gunnery and ground gunnery, basics of lead and what have you. And,
little weapons orientation
right.
also.
And the caliber 50s primarily.
Yeah.
And but we had skeet shooting, trap shooting, and mounted shotguns on turrets so that we could learn how to operate the various turrets on the
They
aircraft.
cross-trained you on all of the
Yes.
systems within
All
the
of them.
bomber aircraft.
Right, the nose, tail, ball, upper, the whole works. And so then when I graduated from gunnery school, they shipped me to Ogden, Utah, where I was assigned to a crew.
Did they have aircraft there, or just
They had
crew?
aircraft there, B-24s there, and
B-24s.
they were just making up the crews.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was assigned there as an assistant radio operator on a B-24. This meant another stripe. So I now had
You're getting the big bucks here.
I now had 4 stripes. 2 weeks later, they decided they didn't have enough radio operators to have a radio operator and an assistant, so they made me radio operator, and they gave me another stripe. So in 11 months, I'd gone from recruit to a sergeant first class, and then I was making big bucks.
You told them you were a good man and you deserved
right,
it, right?
$114 a month.
That's okay. That was pretty good
Right.
back then.
But then we went on to, we got to start getting flying pay, and that was half again of our base pay, so that was another $57. So we were really living it up. And then from there we went to Sioux City, Iowa, for transition training, and we did a lot of practice bomb runs from Sioux City out to Wyoming and dropped on the bombing ranges there, the 100-pound
It was
practice
kind of like
bombing.
crew training, was it?
Crew training,
Yeah.
yes.
With your aircraft?
With
your
our
B-24.
aircraft and our crew, yes. And
How
then-
big was your crew?
10-man crew.
10-man crew.
Yeah. 5, let's see, 4 enlisted and 6 enlisted and 4 officers. And pilot, co-pilot, navigator, and bombardier were officers.
Okay.
And the other 6 of us were gunners.
Technicians, etc.
Right. We had a tail gunner, 2 waist gunners, ball turret gunner, upper turret gunner, and a radio operator.
You were all kind of cross-trained on all of the gun systems.
Well, not all of us. I think just the engineer and myself were cross-trained on all of them. And,
The rest of them just got assigned to a weapon.
more or less. I'm sure they had familiarization on them, but so then they gave me a 6-day furlough, and it took me 2 days.
There?
Right, 2 days to get home, 2 days at home, 2 days to get back, and when I got back, the outfit was gone.
Your whole
The whole field was empty,
Uh-huh.
and
All planes gone also?
all the planes were gone, and MPs were there, and they. After you showed your orders, they said, well, report to a certain barracks, and the plane would be coming in to pick us up. And so those of us that were on leave. So they picked us up and took us to Macon, Georgia, and there we met our crew again.
The same crew
Same
that
crew
you
we
trained
had,
with?
yes.
Okay.
And from there we went to, I don't recall the name of the field in Florida, and received their overseas orders. And sealed orders, and we're told, the pilot was told to take off and take a certain heading, and at a certain time to open the sealed orders, and I'd tell him where he was heading. And so it was from Florida to Natal, Brazil, and on that trip we were using so much fuel that we had to stay there an extra week while they checked out the pilot to see if the pilot wasn't handling the controls correctly or
wasn't
whether the
leaning
plane
enough,
was
huh?
just sucking up too much fuel.
Uh-huh.
And it turned out the plane was just using too much fuel, so they had to install Bombay tanks, extra
Ferry tanks, yeah.
tanks.
Mhm.
And
You were going somewhere where you needed a longer distance
Right.
than to get.
right, so we took off from Brazil and headed for the Ascension Island, which is halfway between Brazil and Africa.
You had a good navigator, I hope.
That was the first thought that entered my mind. All of us were just out of school, and
Yeah.
I hoped that he had done his lessons
I was
well.
going to say, you bunch of young guys
Right.
putting their faith in one man.
Right, it was just a little dot on the map,
Yeah.
you know, and
Yeah.
so fortunately we found it. We landed at the Ascension on Thanksgiving Day
Uh-huh.
and had a nice Thanksgiving dinner there. And
Did
they,
you fly as a single aircraft, or did you
Single
have a
aircraft.
formation?
single aircraft. And from there we went to Marrakech, North Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And from Marrakech, we skirted the coast up to England, up to our base in Tibenham, England.
Where is that located?
It was just south of London,
Just south of London.
right.
Uh-huh.
And then from there, we started more training.
Were you assigned to a squadron or a wing
Uh,
when you were there?
well, we were assigned to a group,
A group,
right?
okay.
2nd Air Division, 445th Bomb Group.
445. Mm-hmm.
And then we started a lot of formation practice and so forth. And,
About how many aircraft do you think were on the field at the
oh,
time?
golly, I would say probably at least 30,
Uh-huh.
possibly more.
Yeah.
And I might mention that that the 445th, that's the same outfit that Jimmy Stewart was in.
Uh-huh.
I was in the 700 Squadron. He was in the 701st,
Uh-huh.
and
At the same field.
at the same field.
Uh-huh.
And I did. Well, I see him riding around on his bicycle all the time. That's all we used to ride around the base.
He didn't solicit you to be part of his
No.
Hollywood career?
No, I flew with him one time. He was checking out a new pilot,
Uh-huh.
and the group was on a mission, and he needed a radio operator to go with him to check out this pilot. So he came over to our squadron and wanted to know if there's any radio operators that wanted to get some flying time, and so I volunteered
Oh, wow.
and had one flight with him. But
And he got you back safely, obviously.
well, we didn't just flew across England. I mean, we didn't go on
Uh-huh.
a combat mission.
Okay.
Yes, I got back safely.
Uh-huh.
So
Oh, good. That's interesting.
Yes.
You know, Jack,
Mhm.
you got to meet
right,
a very famous person in
yes,
our time.
right.
Yeah.
And then
Did you start missions at that time after you
Uh,
completed your
well,
squadron
no,
formation training?
our pilot got some kind of sickness. I don't know what kind it was, but they had to hospitalize him. So they started splitting us up and putting us on as replacement crews anytime there was a mission going out. And it seemed like every time they put one of us on a crew, that crew would abort. Something would happen that they wouldn't go.
Yeah.
So finally the CO said, enough of this is enough. So he gave us another pilot.
Uh-huh.
And December 29th, taking a familiarization flight with this new pilot, we had some problems with the aircraft. Engine caught fire, and tried to extinguish it, and it went out. And we're trying to get ready to make a landing, and it caught up again very bad. And the pilot gave us a signal to bail out. So we started bailing out over England, and I went out at 800 feet. Didn't know it at the time.
That's a pretty low jump.
Right. I counted to 10,
Uh-huh.
pulled the ripcord, looked over, saw the engineer in his chute, looked to see how high I was, and hit.
Yeah.
Broke my leg, and
Oh, did you?
yeah, very
Uh-huh.
very lucky that I didn't break everything.
Yeah, I was going to say, because
That chute
quick, low jump.
I was just about treetop height when the chute fully inflated.
Mm.
So
So you joined the Caterpillar Club early.
right, and but then they X-rayed it. It was just I think they called it the tibula,
Tibula, mhm.
and so all they did was put a soft cast bandage on it and said fit for duty.
Put your flying boots
Right,
back on,
put
you'll
boots
never know,
back on.
right?
So limped out to the plane, went on our first mission. This is a summer uniform, summer flying suit that we used. This is my squadron identification insignia. When we flew at high altitude, we wore the summer flying helmet which had the earphones for the radio built in. We wore goggles, and we had the oxygen mask. When we got above 10,000 feet, we had to use oxygen. And we had a throat mic to keep our hand free. Being radio operator, I had to have my hand free to use the telegraph key for Morse code. If I used voice communication, the throat mic was all I needed. In addition to this, we also had the winter suit that was underneath this if we were going real high, that was a electric that we could plug into the plane and had a rheostat on it so that we could get some warmth. And so in combat, we wouldn't use this. We would use, first we would put on our long johns, then we'd put on that electric heated suit, then we'd put on a regular uniform. On top of the uniform, we'd put on our leathers, which were leather pants and a leather jacket, use a winter cap, a winter flying helmet, leather gauntlets, leather boots, and on top of that, we'd wear our parachute harness, then our Mae West, and on top of the Mae West, then we put a flak suit. And we had all this equipment. We put all this on before we got in the aircraft. And when we get waddled out to the aircraft, that's literally what we did, was waddle, because had all this weight on us. We could just about fit through that bomb bay door to get up to our assigned position. We went on our first mission to Frankfurt, Germany.
That was a hot mission.
Right, Frankfurt on the Rhine. Yeah. Yep, and everything was fine. A lot of flak, a little bit of fighter, but primarily flak. And got over the target, dropped their bombs, and figured, well, this isn't half bad of what I thought it would be. Mm-hmm. As we were turning off the target, one plane did not get his bombs out. And of course, as you're making a turn on the target, your planes go over top of each other. And as he kicked his bombs out, one of them hit our number 3 engine and knocked it clear out of the airplane, right over the target.
Just took it right.
Took it right out, just a big gaping hole.
You were fortunate.
Yes, and that happened to be the one right outside the window of my radio. I mean, so I look out and all I see is this big hole in the wing.
What'd you say, Skipper? We're missing an engine. It just disappeared.
Right. So, of course, we had to drop out of formation. And my thought then was, wouldn't you know it? You see all those planes heading back to England. Now, if they'd have waited for us, we could have all got back, but here we are struggling along by ourselves.
Keep up with only 3 engines.
Right. And
did you go back low level, or how did you work that?
Well, we had to start dropping down, and we had an overcast, fortunately. And next thing you know, number 1 engine went out. It had been hit by flak, and we didn't know it, but all of a sudden it just malfunctioned and quit. So it put us on 2 engines, and again, the only thing I think that saved us was the overcast. When we got pretty close to what the navigator thought might be the channel, he asked me to get a position report. So I called in for a triangulation, and they called back the position. After we identified ourselves, they called back where we were, and we were over Pas-de-Calais, France. And I called it up to the navigator, and he says, well, that puts us right over Pas-de-Calais. And he no sooner said that than there was a break in the clouds, and we were now at about 8,000 feet. And man, they opened up with us with those flak guns. You could almost see the gunners,
Yeah, you could see the black puffs coming.
Right, and you could see the guys. I mean, you could see the flashes.
Yeah, you could see them.
So with a little, evasive action, we dropped a few more thousand. So at I guess about 4,000 feet then. And
did you have to dump anything?
Anything and everything, thrown out we threw out, say 50 rounds per gun. Threw all the ammunition out, threw out all my radio tuning units, broke out the auxiliary generator, threw that out, and even tried to break the ball turret out of it. Got it broken halfway out, but couldn't get it out of the aircraft. So then we get at that point, I was put in the upper turret because the engineer had to be down.
Yeah.
And I hear fighters at 6 o'clock. swing the guns around. There's two 109s coming in fast. And so they were way out. So waiting for them to get in range, and our fighters at 12. So I'll whip around to the 12 o'clock position, two Spitfires.
Thank goodness.
Because we were just over the channel at
Right.
that point. And they engaged
They
the
took care of that.
109s.
Uh-huh.
And right behind them was some kind of an aircraft, I don't know, twin-engine aircraft that had a big lifeboat on the belly of it.
Huh, like a rescue craft.
A rescue craft, in case we'd gone down in the channel. They were going
That's
to drop the
great.
boat to us.
You glad to see the Brits that time?
Oh
weren't
yes,
you?
oh yes. And then they we get a call from a base station that wants to change our frequency on our identification friend or foe set
Uh-huh.
to a certain channel. So I had to go back because that was way in the back of the aircraft.
Uh-huh.
So I had to go back there and switch it over to the channel they said. And at that point, the two Spits were right on us, ready to knock us down if that didn't give them the signal they wanted.
Oh, really?
Because
Uh-huh.
a lot of times they'd take a plane and, if it crash landed, they'd patch it up
Mm-hmm.
and they'd come up in your formation and
Germans
everything
and
else.
bogus
Right.
flight. Yeah. Uh-huh.
So once that was okay, then they just swung in on our wing and
Brought you
escorted
home.
us in. But as we were coming in, the pilot was having trouble getting airspeed for landing. So he says, anybody wants to bail out, you can jump. We're over England, so if you want to jump, you can. And so Bush, I said, what are you going to do? He said, I'm going to bring this thing in. Okay, well, we'll stay with you.
Ride with it, huh?
So,
You already had your experience
right.
jumping.
And I was right there, right behind the pilot. So I'm hearing him tell the co-pilot, he says, all right, we'll throw it in a dive. He says, and when I tell you, throw the landing gear down. And we don't have time to check it for locking. He says, throw it down and hope it locks. And he says, Leone, fire up a couple of red flares. And so red flare meant either wounded aboard or you're coming in. Just get that runway clear.
Yeah. Yeah.
And fortunately, gear
He was
came
able to
down,
kiss it down for
locked, and he got it down.
Uh-huh.
And the CO came out, and he was hot as a firecracker when he saw that airplane.
Uh-huh.
Why didn't you put it on automatic and head it back to Germany? He says, I'll never be able to get a plane to replace that thing. So that was our first mission.
Yeah.
So
That was an exciting first
baptism by
mission.
fire.
Yeah,
Yes.
definitely that.
Right.
You're going to say, did they scrap the plane and
Yeah, they scrapped it.
issue
Yeah,
you a new
yeah
one?
they never got it.
I was going
back
to say,
in.
with having torn out an engine,
Right.
it's kind of difficult
Yeah,
to repair.
Right.
Well, Clem, after your first mission, how many more missions did you have?
Well, actually, I only had 4.5 more
4.5.
for a total of
What does
five
that
and a
half
half.
mean?
Well, that half means we got halfway in and had to walk back.
Had to walk back. Okay.
Yeah, we were heading on a mission to Gotha, Messerschmitt factory,
Uh-huh.
and we just crossed the channel over Holland, and had just crossed into Germany when we got jumped. Jumped by Focke-Wulf 190s.
190s.
Right up here.
Yeah.
And our escort did not show. P-51s were
Supposed to
supposed
have
to,
51s with you.
right, and for some reason there was a foul up in communication and they didn't show. We sent 20 aircraft from my group
Uh-huh.
on that mission, and they knocked down 13 of us.
The fighters did.
The fighters knocked down 13 of us. We were probably one of the first to go down, and we were hit by Focke-Wulf 190s, as I said, with a 20 millimeter cannon fire, and the B-24 being mostly hydraulic, as soon as those 20s hit us, put us right on fire and knocked out practically every operational thing on the plane.
Yeah.
Couldn't open the bomb bays. Everything went out.
Yeah.
And the bomb bays, of course, was our bailout position. Open the bomb bay doors and jump. Couldn't open the bomb bays. Fire. We were on fire, really on fire. Still had our bombs aboard, and flames just crackling around those bombs. And I grabbed the extinguisher to see if I could put it out. Engineer came out of the top turret, grabbed the extinguisher from me to fight the fire. Then I noticed the co-pilot get up, open the upper hatch, which is used for ditching, crashing in the sea.
Mm-hmm.
He opened that and went out the top hatch. Well, my theory has always been pilot or co-pilot leaves, it's time for this boy to go.
Mm-hmm.
So I grabbed my chute then, and I climbed up on the radio table and tried to climb out that top hatch. And it was pretty rough because the plane was going pretty fast, and I had my back toward the front of the plane, and I had to actually push myself back so I could get the chest chute and lift it up over the aircraft in order to get out of the top hatch. And I grabbed the upper guns and was holding on to the upper turret guns. And then I was wondering if that was a smart move because I had that big old double tail back there, and figured if I let go, there's a good chance to whap right into that thing, you know, or could even go off to the side and hit those props that were still running. So while I was trying to make up my mind, the plane exploded. And when it exploded, when I came to, and of course my only thought falling then was to hunt for ripcord. And so I found the ripcord and popped the ripcord.
Use a chest chute?
Yeah, chest chute. And the chute opened, and then I started looking around and feeling around. I had blood all running up out of my face and in my hair and everything from the concussion. And the plane, I didn't even see the plane. By the time I really realized what was going on, I saw the thing on the ground, burning. And I saw the co-pilot. He was way below me, so I must have been up still probably around 15,000 feet, I guess. And his chute hadn't fully inflated, and he was spiraling in. And seemed like it took me about 15 minutes or so to get down to the ground.
Well, you were a pretty light guy.
Right.
And the chute canopy wasn't that big.
Right. So as I'm coming down, I was heading for what looked like a lake, and I don't swim.
You mean a Baltimore boy didn't swim
right.
in the harbor?
That's right. So my thought right away is, when you know it, I got out of that airplane, I'm going to land right in the middle of that lake and drown.
Mm-hmm.
And so the chute was oscillating, swaying back and forth. And of course our instructions, which all we got was verbal instruction on what to do, was to climb one side of the chute, and that would stop it. So I started climbing the shroud lines, and that tilted the canopy of the chute, and that made you go down faster.
Yeah, it spilled the air.
So I let that go and figured, go ahead and sway. And then as I'm getting lower, I noticed I was coming in backward. So again, cross your arms and grab the shroud lines again and pull, and it'll turn you around. And by God, it worked.
That one worked.
Yeah, it worked. So now I'm heading in right, and I've got it all figured out. I'm going to hit lightly and roll. And next thing I know, the old ground came up much faster than it was coming up before. And my first thought was, I'm not going to break another leg. So I pulled my legs up, landed on my butt, and cracked 3 ribs, and almost broke my back. We were coming across Holland into Germany, and just as we got into Germany, we got hit. And apparently the pilot must have turned the plane around, because even though we were hit over Germany, we landed, those of us that got out landed in Holland. So I was hurting pretty bad.
Yeah,
and
decision.
Right. And I saw all these people running toward me. And so must have been 30 or 40 at least, maybe even 50. An awful lot of people come running toward me. And right away, we'd heard stories about German civilians killing the flyers, and so not that you're brave, because there's no such thing as being brave.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a bunch
territory.
of bull. Right, so pull the old 45, and slam around in, figure take 1 or 2 anyway, and then they start yelling, Hollander, Hollander. Well, that was easy enough to figure that they were Dutch. So I motion them in, and one of them comes in, he says, are you blessed? Blessed. I wonder what he means.
Yeah.
Probably I figure because of all the, blood and all that, he probably meant hurt or wounded. And I get my language card out, and I can't find anything on there.
Yeah, no Dutch.
No, Dutch was in there. No, Dutch was on there, but it didn't say anything about blessed. So I figured, well, maybe this is a Catholic country, and he might be asking me something about religion. So in my card, there was something that said, Ich bin Protestant. And so I said, no, ik ben protestant. And I guess he thought I was crazy, and I thought he was crazy too. So we were both in the same
a crazy group together.
Right. So anyway, they said, "Well, come on." They took me up to the farmhouse that was close by, and gave me some tea to drink and some kind of bread. Made a sandwich, and then at that point, this home guard comes in with a rifle, and for you, the war is over. And
was he a German home guard, or
well,
did you have any
he was
clue what
probably a Dutchman, but he had a uniform and a rifle, but he was definitely a Nazi.
Yeah.
And so he says, "Come," and so we start down the road, and we come to a some sort of a civilian camp, and he says, "In here," and the Dutch people were all following, and they said, "No, don't go in there," and I said, "No, I'm not going in there." I said, "I'm a American soldier. I want to be turned over to the military." He said, "Well, you're hurting." He says, "And I thought it'd be easier here." I said, "I want to go to the military. I want the military." He says, "Okay." And so he says, "Come again." And so we start down the road again, and we come to a crossroad, and the Dutch people are yelling, "Go to the left, go to the trees." Well, I'm looking, I don't see any trees. I have bushes, they look like to me. And so I'm standing there. I really don't know what to do. I'm all befuddled.
Yeah. How old were you?
19.
Yeah, I was going
Right.
to say, new experience
Right,
again.
right. So really befuddled, didn't know what to do. Finally, somebody comes up and taps him on the shoulder and says, "Come." And he took off to the left, and without thinking, I took off behind him. Then I remembered the guy with the gun. So I turned back to look back at him, and the people had grabbed him and were beating the daylights out of him. So we go into what they call the woods. Had a camouflaged hole in the ground there, like a cave. They pulled the cover off of that, put me down in there, and I stayed there for 3 or 4 days until the heat got off. And then in the middle of the night, we went to a church, and then from a church hauled me into Amsterdam. And
How did you get there from there? Did you walk?
well, we walked.
Did you
We
have
walked.
guides?
We walked to the church, always with a guide. They always kept a guide with you. And then from the church, they had a looked like a bus of some sort come in. And at the church, they gave me civilian clothes. And then we got on this bus and went into Amsterdam and went to a private home. And they hid me in the attic of this private home. Got me fake papers showing that I was a deaf and dumb accountant from Sumatra.
Okay.
Sumatra being a Dutch possession, and my complexion being dark, and they're also fair, that they'd spot me right away. And so there I was in civilian clothes with my identification. And then they were looking for a safe route back to Spain to get back to England. But their route had been compromised, and they were trying to find a new safe route. And they gave me an expression to say over the radio that they listened to. They listened to a Radio Orange being broadcast out of England to let the Dutch people know what was going on in the war. And I was to tell them that prikkelraad is aangekomen. And, I have a message for my Dutch friends. Prikkelraad is aangekomen. And I said, "Well, what the heck does that mean?" And he says, "Well, it means barbed wire has arrived." He says, "and that'll be a code to us that this route that we're sending you on is a safe route to get back." And I never did forget that, though, but I never had to use it.
Your Dutch is pretty good.
Right.
You still got it with you.
So anyway, from there, went across the border from Holland into Belgium at night, timed the guards, and then when we got the timing right, when they move out, 1 or 2, they got 5 or 6 of us from different homes, and then we'd slip across, all Americans, yes, and we'd slip across, and they had people in Belgium waiting for us, and they took us into Antwerp, and in Antwerp they put us up in different homes, and waiting for the contact that was to take us to the border of France, and finally they made the contact and turned me and one over to this contact, and he happened to be a collaborator and turned us into the Germans. And
Was he a Frenchman that turned you in, or
well, I guess he was
Belgian?
Belgian. I guess he was Belgian.
Uh-huh.
And
How did that happen? Did they take you to a German?
yeah, he
station or
says, "Come
something?
on." He says, "Now don't worry." He says about where I'm taking you. He says because I've bribed all these people. He says we've got to go this way in order to get you. You know. And
You have
so
a story all made
so
up.
we go in through this building with a couple of German guards out in front. You know, and as soon as we got inside, then you knew it was all over. Then he said, "Here's another one."
Yeah.
And
So two of you got turned in at
yeah,
the same time.
right. So
Do you
they.
know who the other one was? Did you?
Oh yeah, Odell Hooper. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I remember his name. Yeah, he's from Oklahoma.
Oklahoma.
Right, he just died recently.
Uh-huh.
And
So you stayed
so
in contact with
we
him.
stayed together, and they put us both in the same cell in the Antwerp's best prison with a sack full of straw. And believe me, we got bed bugs that night. We had bed bugs. I mean, something crawling. It was bed bugs from that straw. And I guess we stayed there about a week till they got enough of us together, and then hauled us out and put us on the old 40 and 8 cars and hauled us over to, they called it Dulag Luft, which was the interrogation center. I forget the location of that in Germany. And as soon as we got there, they threw us in solitary for a week. And I think they did that so they could see what information they could dig up on us before they called us for the actual interrogation. And it was kind of humorous. I came in front of this interrogation officer after a week, and he says, "Your name, your rank, and serial number." And I gave him that, and he says, "Leone." Yes. He says, "Italian, isn't it?" Yes, it is. He says, "Fighting on the wrong side, aren't you?"
Did this fellow speak good English?
Oh,
or
absolutely.
native?
Perfect English. Yeah, fighting on the wrong side, aren't you? I said, "No, I don't think so." He says, "Well," he says, "it just seems strange Italian and, not fighting with the Italians." And then they give you that friendliness bit to see what they can get out of you.
Sure.
But he knew everything about me because I'd been with the Dutch Underground for 4.5 months. So, it wasn't a recent crash, so they had plenty of time to know that I was around somewhere because they hadn't found my body. And so
they probably had a crew list of your original
right.
crew
Oh, he had
somehow.
he had a crew list there, but it wasn't my crew. In fact, it wasn't my plane. And for some reason, they fouled up on their intelligence. But he wanted to, I think maybe the holster I had from my first jump, my pistol was in my bag. So they gave me another pistol and another shoulder holster, and it had a lieutenant's name on it. And I think I kind of confused them up in the...
probably did.
Right. From there, they took us by train across Germany on up to Poland. And the camp was right here in Poland, Kroszczow, Poland, which is right near the Baltic Sea, as you can see.
Good.
And camp was Stalag Luft number 4, full name Kriegsgefangenenlager der Luftwaffe number 4. At the interrogation center, they gave us a capture parcel, Red Cross capture parcel. And it was made of some sort of fiber, like a suitcase made of fiber. And it had pajamas and scuffed bedroom slippers and a pipe and tobacco and the necessities, the toothbrush, toothpaste, what have you. And when we got to the prison camp, they took them away from us. So at least we could carry them from the interrogation center to the prison
you were just
camp.
a transporter
Right.
in that sense.
And we were very fortunate that when we got off the train, it was about a mile from the camp. And they had these guards lined up all along the route that they took us from the train to the camp.
Were they German
And
or were they
German,
Romanian?
young Germans, and had police dogs. I guess German shepherds. What else? But they made us run, and as we were running, they sicked the dogs on us. They didn't let go of the leash. They just had them nipping at us to keep us moving. And so when we got into the actual compound, the guys that were there said, "Well, you guys were lucky." "What do you mean?" They said, "Man, yesterday and every group that's come in, they've run them in with bayonets He said they've had them fix bayonets and jab you with the bayonets as you come in. I figured, oh boy, you're really making a good story, you know. I mean,
Yeah.
but
Thankful for the dogs,
right.
right?
But the next day, the next group come in. There they were,
Uh-huh.
fixed bayonets, and they run them in with bayonets.
Hmm.
Some guys come in with 10, anywhere from 10 to 40 little
Little jabs.
pricks of the bayonet.
Clem, when you checked into the camp, so to speak, and your motel and all, who were you greeted by, or how did that work? And you know, who were the people that you ran into
Well,
initially?
most of them were Luftwaffe people,
Uh-huh.
and initially we were in tents because they were just building a new compound, a barracks for us to occupy. The camp had been constantly being enlarged.
Mm-hmm.
The Luftwaffe, even when we checked in, they gave us a strip search, and we had some regular army there also, and the regular army were
German regular
yeah,
army
they'd get
forces.
kick you around a little, you know,
Uh-huh.
and swat you every once in a while, but nothing
Not
really
harsh.
real bad. And but the Luftwaffe resented that. In fact, at the interrogation center, when they finished interrogating me, one elderly Luftwaffe officer came over and put his arm on my shoulder, and he says, "How old are you, son?" And I told him. He says, "You know," he says, "you're very fortunate." He says, "This isn't so bad." He says, "Not the best," he says, "but it isn't so bad." He says, "At least you'll get back home." He says, I lost my son, you know, such and such. He said, "Here, let me show you where your cell is." And we just had that feeling. If the Luftwaffe pilot could get back to where your plane went down, he'd want your wings, you know, for a souvenir.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it was just that esprit de corps.
Camaraderie of people doing the same
If
thing.
we had a gunner that opened up on a pilot in his chute, and he was immediately grounded and busted. We just didn't go in for that. I mean, and, you figure once the aircraft went down, he was no longer a danger to you. Let him live. And it was just this feeling that we had. But now we were in these tents, and they gave us Red Cross parcels, which had food in them. Tuna fish and canned chicken and everything.
Did you get a toothbrush again?
No more toothbrushes.
No more toothbrush.
And the commandant, American commandant of the camp,
Senior officer?
senior non-com actually.
You were in a non-com
Right.
camp.
Right,
Did they
non-com,
split you
non-commissioned.
out?
Oh yes,
Non-com. Were
Yes.
they officers there or all non-com?
all non-coms.
Okay.
And they gave me the choice of going to the officers' camp
Uh-huh.
as an orderly, and I told them no, I'd prefer going with my own type. And word came down to ditch our tents, and then to put the dirt in our hats and take them to a predesignated spot and just dump it so that we would have a pile of dirt there, which we all did. And pretty soon we had a nice pile of dirt. And so as soon as the unarmed guards that walked among us to see what information they could pick up, we called them ferrets.
Uh-huh.
As soon as they spotted that, they sounded the alarm, called all the other guards back on duty, made everybody fall out, came in with those real long steel spikes hunting for a tunnel,
Uh-huh.
made us empty the tents, and of course there was no tunnel, but it annoyed them and caused aggravation
I
for
was
them.
going to say, you gave them a challenge.
And that was the thing, yeah,
Yeah,
that
sure.
was the only thing that they could
That was
do.
one of the games
But-
you could play, right?
Well, you figure that far north, an escape didn't make sense because you have to go all the way across Germany. What are the odds of going all the way across Germany?
Mm-hmm.
Very little.
Yeah.
So as a result of that, from then on, when they gave us the Red Cross parcels, they'd puncture the cans. Then you either had to eat it or lose it,
Uh-huh.
because that they figured you couldn't accumulate it to make an
Dig
escape.
a tunnel or anything.
Right.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So then they put us finally in barracks, and when we got in the barracks, the next interesting thing that happened was we started talking up that there was going to be an escape attempt on a certain date, and it was going to take place at about 10 o'clock at night, and there were going to be 6 guys involved in it, and so that they weren't all in the same barracks, so they would know who their other people were.
Mm-hmm.
They were all going to shave their head. And then we get word down, everybody shaved their heads.
Uh-huh.
So we all shaved our heads. And around 9:30 at night, all the lights go on. Everybody, Ross Midham, get you out for roll call and everything. And the old commandant comes out there and he says, "Take off your hats." And everybody pulls the hats off, and there's about 6,000 bald heads shining in the moonlight.
There were
So
about 6,000 in your camp.
we
is
had
that it?
about 10, but not
10.
a lot of them were skeptical. They wouldn't shave their heads.
Oh, okay.
But he knew he'd been had at that point.
Uh-huh.
And meanwhile, the guards had all been doubled up again,
Yeah,
you know.
sure.
And
They had to come on
right,
extra duty.
right. So he got even with us. He made us stand there for about 2 hours, and this was in the middle of winter,
Yeah.
the bald heads.
Did you have any heavy clothes issued to you?
No,
Or how
no.
did that work? You had
We
just,
just
a
had
regular uniform?
had what we had, and they no uniforms. I had a British jacket that I got somewhere. I don't know where I got that. Maybe from one of the other prisoners or something.
Did you have Brits intermingled with you as far
Yes,
as
we had
the
some
barracks
British.
and everything?
Yes, but
So you got a little history
mostly
lesson?
American though. But we
Mostly?
did have a few Brits. Yeah.
You got a little history lesson on England, perhaps,
Right.
during
Yep.
your
Right.
time there?
Right. Made us hate England more. But then the Russians started to overrun the camp.
They were coming in
We
from
could hear
East
the
Prussia
we
area.
could hear the artillery, Russians coming in from this area here, and so they decided to evacuate the camp. So we get the word we're going to evacuate. Take everything that you can carry, and that's it. So on February, I think it was about the 7th, somewhere around there, we all walked out of the camp.
As we 1944?
1945.
45.
And as we walked out of the camp, they had a whole warehouse full of Red Cross parcels. They only gave us one for every 2 or 3 men, but there was enough there for one per man, which is what it was supposed to be. And then they let us take as many as we wanted. Well, each of us took one under each arm, and I think made almost a quarter of a mile with it before we had to bust it up, take out what we could stuff
What
in
you
our
wanted.
pockets, and throw the rest away. And then we started that what they call the German Death March. That's kind of an exaggeration. The guards were no better off than we were.
Were they, once again, Luftwaffe type person?
Yes, and regular Army as well. And mostly, at that point, it was mostly regular Army and old men, very old. They pulled all the youngsters and put them on the line.
You send them back to stop the Russians, probably.
And we slept in fields, and so if we were lucky, we got in a barn. And I'll tell you, when you go in a barn and you got straw there that's mixed with horse manure, and you got a bed down in it, well, it's an experience that you probably never want to go through, but you'll never forget it if you ever do. As soon as you do, you get the heat of that manure, and that causes a clammy type of sweat over the entire body. And the body lice really love that sweat.
They like that, huh?
And so they start playing football or something across their stomach, and it's really a miserable feeling. And temperatures 25, 30 below, one of the coldest winters Germany had. And we lost, I understand from what I read, that we lost between 12 and 1,500 people on the march. They had us in groups of 200 or 300. And we moved over across on the map here, we moved over in this direction. And then as we got over in here, the English started to override us.
That was
So
in
they-
Germany itself?
Right. So they doubled us back, moved us south and doubled us back. And then the Russians, they heard them coming again, so they turned us around and moved us back, and we surrendered to the English.
As a group, you just...
As 200 in a group.
200.
Yeah. So they surrendered to the English, and then we had to make our way as best we could over to Brussels. And in Brussels, the English gave us, burned all our clothes, let us take a good hot shower,
Give you physical or anything?
deloused us. No, not
No physical.
no, deloused us and gave us a British uniform that I was issued when I was liberated, and that I wore into Brussels on VE Day. So
But
on
were
V-
you debriefed by the British or
No.
anything?
no. On VE Day, we were in Brussels. We were liberated, I think, on about the 5th, and VE Day was on May the 8th.
Mm-hmm.
Took us 3 months on that march. And they gave us $10, put us in a British uniform, and turned us loose in Brussels.
Uh-huh.
And I got to tell you, we were at a disadvantage. There were Americans there.
Yeah.
And the
Real
Americans made out real well, but that British uniform didn't do us all that much good. And that was pretty much it. And from there, they shipped us down to Le Havre, France, Camp Lucky Strike. And there they gave us the physical and put us on some kind of a limited diet because of our stomachs being shrunk so much, and stayed there for a week or so, and then boarded the Jonathan Worth Victory ship and headed back to the States.
This was in May, June
This was
45?
Yes, in May of 45.
Did you come into Baltimore?
No, it took 13 days across the Atlantic
Uh-huh.
and run into some storms. And again, my thought is, I've come through a war, now I'm going to drown.
Yeah.
But we pulled into New York Harbor,
Uh-huh.
and as we pulled up the Hudson, all the ships in the port there blowing their horns, and
Did you
the
get a fireboat or two, or?
no, but the little pleasure boats with the gals in the bikinis came out, and they all had
Well, that made you
loudspeakers on playing "Don't Fence Me In."
Uh-huh. Great.
And
Was your ship all POWs?
yes,
It was.
yes.
Uh-huh.
And then they sent us. We docked, and they sent us up to Fort Dix.
Uh-huh.
Gave us a big steak dinner and so forth, and let us call home and try to get transportation to get home. So.
Was your mom glad to hear that
Oh
you
yes.
went flying?
Well, she never commented
She
on
never
it.
made it.
No.
She just glad to have you home.
Right.
No,
Right.
that's great.
Yeah. So the uniform that I was wearing when I was discharged, showing the 8th Air Force insignia, my rank as a tech sergeant, and that the recognition that I was a radio operator. These are the 8th Air Force emblems on each lapel, with the United States and the Army Air Force insignia over there. My presidential unit citation, and my ruptured duct discharge emblem. On the other side, I have my crew member wings with the blue background, which denotes that it was a combat crew member, and my different ribbons for my various decorations. Down here I have weapons qualification badges and Army Air Force Technical School badges.
Clem, we finally got you back home, which is great, and we've pretty much covered what happened to you from the time you were enlisted into the Army Air Corps and got repatriated back to the United States and back to your family and your mom in Baltimore. And now I think we'll move on a little further and cover the rest of your career as a